We're constantly being told to manage our risk, to calculate the odds of everything. But what if the whole idea of risk is less about math and more about a story we tell ourselves? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on what we fear and why it's not as straightforward as you think.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a puzzle that, honestly, we all deal with. You might find yourself more anxious about a plane crash than your daily commute in a car. Or maybe you worry about some rare, exotic disease more than something common like heart disease. Statistically, it makes no sense, right? Our sense of danger can feel completely, irrational. So, to figure this out, we have to get our heads around a kind of surprising fact. The concept of risk itself is a pretty modern invention. It's not just some timeless feature of the world. Nope, it's an idea with a really complex history. And if we can understand that story, we can start to solve our puzzle. All right, so we live in this world that is just saturated with risk alerts, right? From the stock market to our health apps. But how we react to them is all over the place. And it's usually driven by something way deeper than just the raw data. I mean, really think about this for a second. For the ancient Greeks, a storm that sinks a ship wasn't a calculated probability of bad weather. No, it was the wrath of Poseidon. Bad things happening were part of a much bigger story about gods or fate or morality. The very idea of separating danger into a neat, calculable thing, that only became possible in what the sociologist Max Weber called the disenchantment of the world. Basically, a world where magic and gods gave way to science and calculation.
So how did we get from fearing angry gods to plugging numbers into spreadsheets? Well, our first big clue comes from an economist back in 1921 named Frank Knight, and he gave us a truly foundational piece of this puzzle.
Knight did something that sounds simple but is actually brilliant. He drew a sharp line between two ideas, uncertainty and risk. Think of uncertainty as this vast, deep, unpredictable ocean. It's everything we can't possibly know or measure about the future. But risk, that's different. That's a specific, measurable, probabilistic bet. It's like knowing the odds in a game of poker. You can calculate it. And here's the kicker. Knight's big point was that even when we try our best to measure risk, we are still swimming in that much bigger ocean of uncertainty. We can calculate the odds all we want, but we can never, ever eliminate the great unknown. And that little gap between what we can measure and what we can't, that's where things get really interesting.
But hang on, what if the problem isn't just about what we can't measure, but it's about what we choose to measure in the first place? This, my friends, brings us to a major twist in the story.
This mind-bending paradox comes from the anthropologist Mary Douglas. She offered this radical new way of looking at things. Let me read it again. Can we know what risks we are taking? No, we can't. But yes, we have to act as if we do know. So, what does that even mean? It sounds like a contradiction, but it's pure genius. If we can't know everything, how on earth do we decide what to worry about? Douglas's answer was that every society has what you could call a cultural filter. We collectively, and often unconsciously, select which potential dangers are worth our attention. For instance, why might one culture get incredibly worked up about the risks of, say, genetically modified food, while another is way more concerned with the dangers of online misinformation? It's not about pure logic. It's a reflection of our shared values and anxieties. And this is the core idea right here. What we fear isn't necessarily what is objectively the most dangerous thing. It's what our society has agreed is dangerous. We focus on risks that seem to threaten our way of life or our moral code. So you can learn a whole lot more about a society by looking at what it's afraid of than by looking at the actual statistics.
Okay, so this whole idea of culture selecting our fears gets a lot more intense when we bring it into our modern industrial world. A world where our own progress has created entirely new kinds of threats that our ancestors couldn't even have dreamed of.
Just look at this timeline. The sociologist Ulrich Beck looked at these man-made catastrophes, Bhopal, Chernobyl, Deepwater Horizon, Fukushima, and he saw a disturbing pattern. He argued that as an unavoidable side effect of all our incredible progress, we started manufacturing brand new, potentially catastrophic risks on a global scale.
And he gave this new reality a name, the Risk Society. See, in the past, the big political fight was about how to distribute the goods, things like wealth and opportunity. But Beck argued that today, we're just as obsessed with how to distribute the bads, the pollution, the nuclear waste, the unforeseen consequences of our own success. We're essentially haunted by the ghosts of our own inventions.
So, if culture helps us choose our fears and our own progress creates brand new ones, That leads us to a final, really crucial question. Who gets to decide what to do about all this? This brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, where risk stops being just a concept and becomes a powerful tool.
This is where thinkers like Michel Foucault are so important. They pointed out that the very act of defining something as a risk is a powerful way to govern people. It's an idea he called governmentality. Think about it. Once you frame something like, say, obesity as a public health risk, it suddenly justifies all sorts of interventions into people's diets, lifestyles, and choices. Managing risk becomes a core function of modern power.
So let's bring it all home. That weird, sometimes irrational sense of risk we all have starts to make perfect sense when we stop thinking of it as just an objective number. It's a lens shaped by our culture. It can be a weapon used for political control. And most of all, it is a story a society tells itself about what's important, what's valuable, and what it should be afraid of.
And that, right there, is the most crucial thing to take away from all this. The next time you hear a news report or a politician talking about a scary new risk, you now have the power to ask the most important questions. Who is telling this story, and why are they telling it to me right now? Because understanding the story behind this statistic, that gives you the power to see the world so much more clearly.